Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Edwin Ragas. I'm the director at the NYU Wasserman Center for Career Development at the School of Professional Studies. I'm really excited to kick off today's Behind the Title session. We've been doing quite a few of these this month, and the goal is to virtually connect you with industry professionals across different industries to learn a little bit more about what goes on behind their titles. And today we have Sabrina Aggarwal, who works in the PR field and communications. And I'll introduce her in a second, and she'll be doing most of the speaking here. So our theme is focused on the title of a senior vice president in communications. And as I mentioned, the goal of the program is for you to better understand the title's job duties and responsibilities, ways to be successful with this title, and also hear from Sabrina, her career journey and how she got to be in this title. We'll hear from her for about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And certainly if you have reactions or questions throughout, you can feel free to do that in the chat box, but we also will definitely carve some time out in the end for Q&A. And we also have a really simple session worksheet that you can use to take notes during or after the session. So we'll go ahead and put that in the link, or we'll put that link in the chat box. And what you can do is just make a copy of it and then save it to your drive, and then you can type your notes into it directly. Some best practices to keep in mind while we're in the space is to keep your mics on mute while you're not talking, but it would also be helpful to turn your cameras on if you are able, so that Sabrina doesn't feel like she's just talking to me and Leica. It is going to be a small group, so it would be helpful if she's able to see you, if you're able to turn your cameras on. And to just come from a place of seeking insight, information, and advice. And to also be respectful of Sabrina's time. So we ask that you stay present and also engaged in the room, and also not to be shy. Like I said, it's a small group, so just be confident and take advantage of the opportunity. And it's all just a simple conversation. And if we run into any tech issues or hiccups, thank you in advance for being flexible and understanding. And with that, I will turn it over to our guest speaker for today, Sabrina.
Thanks so much, Edwin. That was a really, really nice introduction. And nice to meet everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here today. I actually teach as an adjunct professor in the master's program for public relations and corporate communications. And so I teach public relations writing seminar 101, which has been really, really great. I don't think any of you are my students yet, but hopefully I'll have an opportunity to teach you in the future. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I know sometimes when people share PowerPoint presentations, it can be scary and you think it'll be boring. I only have a few slides here just to kind of help guide the conversation. But as Edwin said, I'd love for this to really be a kind of mutually beneficial discussion and really lively. And I'm really here to answer your questions. So as Edwin mentioned, I am an SVP in communications, specifically at a PR agency. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got to the path of where I am today. So a little bit about my story, and then some of the current roles and responsibilities that are inherent to my job, but I think are pretty inherent to most people's roles as an SVP, whether you're in public relations or communications of some kind. So one of the things that I really like is, I'm sure many of you have seen this chart before, which is that success, most people think success is this straight line and you kind of climb this corporate ladder. And I have found that my career path has very much been what you see on the right. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second, but it's really been like this. I was exploring myself in my 20s, and I did not always work in public relations. I worked in public health, and more recently I've sort of climbed this corporate ladder, and it's looked a little bit more like this. But I think over the past 15 years or almost 20 years of my career, it's really looked more like this. And I think it's helped me get to where I am. I think another quote that's been really useful is you might have heard Steve Jobs has said in the past, or had said in the past, that he couldn't connect the dots looking back, but he could connect the dots looking forward. So every kind of opportunity that I had led me to where I am today. And I'll talk a little bit about what that kind of looks like. So to kind of show you about how my path was squiggly, this is very much what my path was in my 20s. So I got my undergraduate degree at Penn. I am based in Philly. I'm a Philly girl at heart, and I went to college in Philly. I studied public health and anthropology at Penn, and I very much had thought, being the good Indian daughter that I was, that I would go into medicine and get my MD. After I graduated from Penn, I went to work at a think tank in DC called Families USA. This was right around the time of President Obama's first term in his presidency in 2007, 2008, when the Affordable Care Act was being debated in Congress, and this kind of idea of universal health care was coming to fruition. I fell in love with this idea of affordable healthcare and thought, maybe my path isn't medicine. Maybe it's public policy. Maybe it's thinking about how we can affect healthcare at a population level as opposed to an individual level, which is what I associated being a doctor with. So then I changed paths a little bit and decided to get my master's of science in public health from Johns Hopkins, and I did a focus in health policy and management. Within that, it was really focused on domestic health policy, and I was really, really excited to read the Affordable Care Act and immerse myself in health policy, and that kind of led me on this path in my 20s of working specifically in public health. But as you can see, it's been a very squiggly path. I didn't stay at one place for a long time. I really very much explored what I was interested in my 20s. After I got my master's in public health, we had to do what was called a master's field placement. I did this at a healthcare consulting company called John Snow Inc. in Boston. And I, at this junction in my life, realized that I really wanted to do more international health policy as opposed to domestic health policy. I was frustrated with the space. I found that I wanted to kind of work in an international setting, and to be able to get those jobs in the US, I had to get work experience abroad. So that led me to move to New Delhi, India. And I spent a good part of my 20s in there working for the Clinton Health Access Initiative and a water sanitation and hygiene startup called Wash United. I was responsible at CHAI for doing a lot of research around the kind of product development and launches of HIV drugs, and basically what contributed to a lag in when a product was developed to when it got into a patient's hands. And so that was really interesting work and kind of got me thinking about like product comms and product marketing. I was then recruited by Wash United, which was this really interesting water sanitation NGO in India that was doing work around sports, entertainment, and celebrities to get people really excited about hand washing and hand hygiene. And I got to do some really, really exciting work through them throughout rural India. That led me to my job at Charity Water, which you may have heard of because it's a very well-known NGO or nonprofit focused on bringing safe and effective water systems in the developing world. And I had a really good experience there working on programs in India and Nepal. And so I was kind of building up my international development portfolio. And then that led me to the end of my 20s, where I landed at Community Systems Foundation, which was a nonprofit funded by the United Nations. And I did a lot of work in Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, India, and Nigeria. So my whole point of this is just to show that there was a common thread here of healthcare and public health, but I moved around a lot. And that wasn't always my goal. I didn't kind of go into any position and say, I'm going to move around a lot. I'm not going to stay in one place for a long time. But I felt like it was important in my 20s to kind of find my passion and find who I was. And it took going from health policy in the US to health policy internationally to kind of get this well-rounded portfolio. When I hit 30, which was right around here, I came to a crossroads personally and professionally where I realized I wanted to be based in one place for a long time. I was kind of living out of a suitcase, traveling the world, doing really exciting work, but I wanted to be in one place for a period of time where I would have a 401k, I would have stability, I would have things that made me feel like I could kind of grow in one career path at any given point. And I met someone at a networking event that introduced me to the world of PR. And they said, everything that you've done in your nonprofit work is very similar to what I do in PR and healthcare communications, but I do it in the private sector. And I have a 401k and I'm able to climb a corporate ladder and all these things. So I thought, sure, I'll give that a chance. And that has led me to this very straight path to SVP.
Marina, can I just jump in with a question on if you could go back to the last slide?
Yeah.
Because the folks who are watching now or maybe watching this later might find themselves sort of in this stage of their life, right? Their 20s and sort of hopping or jumping around, so to speak, and trying to truly carve out what their area is going to be. So can you talk a little bit more about like when you were in this stage of your career, like what the discernment process looked like for you in terms of when you knew it was time to leave, where you were and look for something else, how you approached your search to ensure that you were really taking the best parts of what your previous experiences were and finding those in the next?
That's a great question. I think in most of these instances, I went with my gut and my heart. When I was at John Snow, I remembered applying, and this was more than 10 years ago, I remember applying to jobs in international development and not getting them and being really frustrated. And I found that it was because I didn't have international experience, I wasn't getting those jobs. Then when I applied for paid jobs abroad, I found I wasn't getting those and I was getting really frustrated. I had a master's degree, at a top degree from university, what's going on? And that led me, this was a very key juncture here because I made the decision to basically cold email people and see if they needed assistance. And I did that at the Clinton Health Access Initiative. I emailed HR in Boston and I said, I'm willing to work for free anywhere in the world. What options do you have available? I want to learn, I want to get experience. And they wrote back and they said someone in the New Delhi office is looking for an unpaid consultant, basically to help them with this research project. And I basically flew to India a month later. My family happens to be from New Delhi, so it was kind of a nice coincidence because I was able to basically stay in New Delhi for free, which helped a lot. But I will say that that unpaid experience then led me to get recruited by Wash United. And the only overlap was the fact that I was based in New Delhi and I had healthcare experience, but I was then recruited by Wash United. My impetus for leaving Wash United was actually that they ran out of funding from the Gates Foundation. And that was kind of the point that led me to this juncture where I was like, I find the nonprofit world to be a bit unstable. It's based on funding. I may have to travel the world all the time. And I didn't find that financially it could be a stable position for me where I could be at one place for a long time. When I got the job at Charity Water, it was a dream role for me. The way I got that job was I wrote a personal letter to the CEO, the founder, and basically told him how much I wanted to work at his company. So every job I've gotten has been very much by me rolling up my sleeves, putting myself out there. I've never applied to a job, to be honest, by submitting my resume online and waiting to get a response. I write directly to the people who make the decisions and I write from the heart. So I knew I wanted to work at Charity Water. I wrote to Scott Harrison, who's the founder, and I basically said, I've been following your work for a long time. I've been working in India in the water, sanitation, hygiene sector. I dream about working at Charity Water. This is what I think I can bring to the table. This is what I think, I can do for you versus what you can do for me. And he wrote back that day and I came in for an interview and got the job. So it's and this was out of thousands of applications. It wasn't that I was super special. It was just that I really, really wanted that job and it showed. and I did have, relevant experience. So I think that helped. But I think the point is, and to answer your question, I don't necessarily if I knew when the right time to leave was. I think it was me just kind of wanting to get my feet wet in different opportunities. And, I think that when you really want something, it shows. And so you write to people and you say, like, let's go to coffee. I want to learn about what you're doing. I have relevant experience and I'm really interested in, not just working for you, but this is what I can bring to the table. And so it was a lot of hard work. Nothing was ever really handed to me. It just was a lot of hard work. I don't know if that fully answers your question.
No, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. And it's, I remembered being on this path and being quite lost, to be honest. And I remember my parents thinking that I was just kind of lost and didn't have a career path, because their idea of the career path was that straight line. But I really think I needed to go through all these ups and downs and different experiences to find myself to where I'm at today, which is very much more on that straight path. And for those familiar with media agencies, there's a very strict kind of, you start as an assistant account executive, then you go to account executive, then senior account executive, then account supervisor, senior account supervisor, vice president, and senior vice president. I hopped a lot here too in the past 5 years. And that's what got me to be from a senior account executive at the very bottom to a senior vice president today. And I never applied for any of these jobs. I was actively recruited by each of these agencies. What I do in healthcare communications currently at MMC is I manage the internal and external communications for a Japanese pharmaceutical company called Eisai. And what we do is essentially anytime there is a product approval, such as an FDA approval or a regulatory milestone. So those familiar with FDA product communications may know that you typically start with a top line results announcement, which announces the data that's just being read out from a phase 3 trial. Then you move on to a filing acceptance, which means that the FDA has approved your filing application for an FDA approval. And then you move to an FDA approval. At each point in those regulatory milestones, there's communications that goes out, a press release, an internal announcement and whatnot. So my company at MMC, we develop all those communications. I specifically work on Eisai, but our company works with Pfizer, with Merck, with all the major pharma companies. I was able to really leverage all of my experiences from before all of these, because I was always doing communications in some regard. I was, writing fact sheets or writing social media posts for CSF, or I was managing stakeholders, either grantees or grantors. Most of my job in healthcare communications has been managing our clients, so managing the pharmaceutical companies. And all of it's been within the form of communication. So delivering buttoned up presentations, writing press releases, making sure that our communications are really buttoned up, I would say. And so I kind of wanted to give you a sense of a day in the life of an SVP, because it's a combination of hard skills and soft skills. On the hard side, I would say client relationship is the number one piece of being an SVP. So I manage our client, not just over email, but on the phone, on text. We're constantly in communication all day, every day. When I say management, I really mean project management, but also management of employees. I have a team of 7 direct employees, but then I manage a broader integrated team across creative, digital, media that has about 20 people. Budgeting and forecasting is a big part of your job. And I think if you're an SVP in communications or outside of communications, you're going to be doing budgeting and forecasting, which I very much learned on the job. It wasn't something I came in with. When I say stretch above and flex below, I mean that as an SVP, I often have to do the jobs of my bosses who are managing directors, or I have to do the jobs of those below me because people are on PTO, people are sick, or people are strapped. And so you kind of have to be able to flex and do the work of the people below and above you. Hiring is a big part of my job. So whenever we have resumes that come in, I'll look at the resumes, I'll determine if they're a good fit for our team, and I'll interview those people as well. Employee engagement is a very big piece of our job. It's not just about having people work for you, but it's about people working for you and being happy and finding purpose in their work. So as managers, we learn how to keep employee morale up and how to keep employees engaged, which means that they're, not only doing their work, but we're talking to them about professional development and learning development opportunities. And then performance reviews is an inherent part of our role too. Some of the softer skills, which I think I came in with just from my experience in my 20s, so that helped. The harder skills I definitely learned on the job, but the softer skills like patience are important because you're going to have clients with absurd deadlines. You're going to have people you manage that maybe have attitude problems. Patience is an important part of the job. Empathy, it's important. In my role as a manager, I find that I lead by empathy above anything else. An entrepreneurial spirit very much goes hand in hand with stretching above and flexing below. And it really means that you're willing to roll up your sleeves and problem solve. Being a good listener is an inherent, I think, important attribute for being a good manager, because it's not just hearing what people are saying, but listening to what they're saying. And that's not just your clients, but your team too. They're burnt out. They may not directly tell you they're burnt out, but they'll indirectly tell you. So it's listening for those cues. And then having confidence is really important. And I didn't always have a ton of confidence. I think it just came with experience. And you have to have confidence when you're dealing with clients day in and day out. So I think I finished a little bit earlier there than 30 minutes, but I kind of wanted to give you a sense of at least what it's like to be an SVP in my role. But I think no matter what communications agency you're at, you're going to have a combination of these hard and soft skills to do your job. But yeah, definitely happy to answer.
Leica, do you want to jump in and ask your question?
Yeah, so my question was just that I wanted to know how you learned all of these like necessary skills that brought you to become SVP, because I know a lot of people get a lot of certifications to put them on their LinkedIn or their resumes, and I know you were recruited for most of the jobs. But I just want to know, like, did you learn things on the job and then just add that to your list of skills, or actually go out and get like project management certifications?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, I just learned them on the job. So a lot of healthcare PR roles will be similar no matter what agency you go to. At an AE, SAE level, you're going to be doing media monitoring. You're going to be drafting materials. I spent a good part of my job not just learning during my work hours, but learning outside of my work hours too. And for example, I think the FDA approval process, which I highlighted briefly, is something that I learned outside the job because I had to get up to speed quite quickly in my role. And so I just kind of learned on my own. And then when I was recruited and I interviewed, I was always very confident that I could do the next level. And it wasn't made up. It was just that I had come in with 10 years of prior experience. So I felt like I could do the job, which helped. So I think the soft skills, the confidence, the empathy, the wanting to be a manager helped me a lot in my interview processes, which helped me kind of get to the next level. But there actually really wasn't anything that I alluded to on my LinkedIn.
Okay.
The only other piece I would add is that being authentic throughout this whole process is really important. Like I said, nothing was really ever handed to me on a silver spoon. I worked really hard to get to each step that I've gotten. But the authenticity piece is important because one of the things that I found that was a passion area of mine was diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when I was at and just going back here, when I was at Edelman, I started the first Asian employee resource group. When I was at BCW, I started the first Asian employee resource group, and I did add those to my LinkedIn. And strangely enough, those things really stood out to other agencies, because I think DE&I is increasingly becoming a very important topic, as not just a nice to have at companies, but a must have for companies. So I think you're seeing a lot of kind of chief diversity, equity, inclusion officers and roles around that. But it wasn't something I did because I was like, oh, that's, that's a sexy area right now. It has been a passion point of mine. So I think being authentic and true and throughout your recruiting and interview process is also really important.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go ahead and ask this question. They're at work, so they can't ask it out loud. What qualities do you pay attention to the most when you're interviewing a candidate?
Yeah, being buttoned up is very important to me, and that is presented in several ways. When a person shows up on time for their interview, that might seem like a no-brainer, but I expect that. There are instances where I interview candidates and they're a few minutes late and they don't apologize or say why. It's just like, whatever, and I come from maybe a different generation where I just don't think that's okay. So being on time for your interview is very important. I do think sending thank you notes after your interview is a must-have. It's the easiest thing in the world. Nowadays, you have everyone's email either on your interview invite, or you can easily find them online. There's no excuse for not having a thank you note. I expect that. And when I don't get it, it shows me that that person is maybe just not that interested in the job or doesn't care enough. But it's something that takes 2 minutes to do. I very often don't get them, but when I do, it sticks out to me. I think willingness to learn is very important, because I don't expect someone to come in on the job and know how to do everything. But if they have an eagerness and willingness to learn, that's huge for me, because we can teach you on the job. I just want to know that you're interested. And then lastly, I will say, I can generally tell a person's attitude when I'm interviewing them. I want to know that they're going to be a good team player. I manage my teams as an all hands on deck kind of team, where no one's working in silos, we're all working together. And if I find that this person isn't going to be a team player, isn't going to be engaged in the corporate culture, that's kind of a red flag to me, because then it can impact another person's employee engagement, their morale, whether or not they want to be a part of the team. So those are the characteristics that I think stick out to me the most.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question about, you talked about a day in your life and you mentioned client relationships and how you speak with them. You're on the phone, you're on text, you might be on email. Around what time does your day start and around what time does your day end? Do you have that hard boundary where you say, okay, well, it's X time, it's time to end the day? And is that something that's focused on at the company that you're in, or in any of the companies the media companies?
Yeah, that's a good question, especially nowadays in a COVID environment where you're working from home. There are blurred lines, because I'll give you an example. The room I'm in right now is my office, but it's my bedroom and my workout room too. We live in a 2-bedroom condo. So the ability for me to separate work from personal life can be challenging just because of the environment that we're in. Whereas before, in a pre-COVID setting, when I was going to work, I'd go to work by 9, leave work at 6, and I was able to leave work physically and literally at 6. That's not really the case anymore in a remote setting. The second thing I'll say is that typical agency life is not a 9-to-5 job. And so when you're coming into this world, you have to know that you're going to have to stretch above that 9-to-5. And it's because when you work in a media news environment, you have to be willing to, work late to get that press release out, to meet a client's needs. I also have a 1-year-old, and so my day typically starts at 5:30 when he gets up. But my working world really starts around 8:30. I start reading my emails and stuff around 7:30. I get online around 8:30. I try to finish by 6 so that I can kind of feed my son and spend the evening with him. But then I will sometimes hop back online depending upon how busy the day is. So it is a time intensive career. It is very intense. It was something I was personally looking for at this stage in my career, but it's definitely not for everyone.
Yeah, that question comes up a lot with, especially folks who are discerning between a career. And maybe we can stop the share here actually, so we can,
Yeah.
yeah, people who are discerning between, do I go into agency or work in-house? And a big factor for that is sort of the expectation of needing to be on all the time,
Yep.
which is the case mostly that we've seen, right, for agencies.
Yep. Yeah, and I think I will say our agency is trying to do a good job of having people avoid burnout. We don't want it to be a case where you're burned out and then you quit, or, that's not our intention either. We've introduced a number of wellness initiatives. We do have a lot of time off. We have mental health days. You're not going to work 12-hour days every day. It's just that the work ebbs and flows. So sometimes you'll have 9 to 5, sometimes you'll have 9 to 9. The way that I personally manage my team is I don't care when you sign on or sign off, just as long as the work gets done. And I encourage people to, really take their time off. And if they do work particularly long days or weeks, I always give comp days. So like, if I notice a particularly long stretch, I'll say, you need to take a day off, and I give them extra time off. Not everyone manages that way, but that's how I approach management on my teams. But it is a challenging thing that we're dealing with in this industry, because now the future of work is changing so much as a result of COVID. More and more companies are offering flexible opportunities. And that means that we have to be competitive with that industry. So we need to offer flexible working, opportunities. And we are now. We don't just hire MMCs based in New York, but we don't just hire people based in New York. So you can be a fully remote employee. In terms of, I think there was a question about in-house versus agency.
Oh, I just brought that up as something that we hear, yeah, from students typically.
Yeah, and I think the assumption is, when you go in-house to like a pharmaceutical company, which is what I know more, that you're going to work less. The clients I have found work just the same as we do. So, but I think potentially the benefits are better at in-house at a pharma company. I will say that having agency experience on your resume opens up a lot of doors. And I think that's why I've been recruited so much too. And as have my friends been. When you have an agency on your resume, it can really open up doors for you, because I think recruiters and job hiring managers know that it's hard work to work at an agency. So they know that you're going to have the right kind of experience.
So building on that, what would you say is, maybe you've experienced this yourself, or you see this in the folks that you bring on and hire, what typically is like the steepest learning curve for folks who are just starting in a PR communications role?
That's a good question. One of them, confidence. We have to present and speak to our clients all day, every day. And I don't like it if I manage my teams, at least, where I'm not the only person doing that. So everyone on the team will speak to the clients, present to the clients. Building up your confidence, your presentation skills, that is a steep learning curve. I think multitasking, time management is a steep learning curve, and knowing how to manage up and manage down. So if there's a lot on your plate, figuring out how to raise your hand and delegate those tasks. I think for someone coming in straight out of college, that is something that's very challenging for them. They're not very comfortable opening up about the fact that there's too much on their plate. The third, I would say, are maybe some of the harder skills, which when you work in pharma PR, there's a system that you have to learn. It's different for every pharma company, but it's either PromoMats, Viva Vault, or Zinc. And it's the system that's used to upload files and review files, because anytime a material goes out on behalf of a pharmaceutical company, it has to get reviewed by a medical, legal, and regulatory team. So we upload files to the system. It's a process that takes time to learn and can be hard for some. So I think that learning curve is probably the other one I've seen there to be a steep one for.
I think you touched on this already in terms of employee engagement and making sure that folks aren't burnt out. But Grace just asked, she mentioned that she worked at a place where everyone left because everyone was burnt out. I don't know if you want to add anything more to, how to maintain your team and make sure your employees are working happily in your company.
Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit. If you go into an agency world, you have to go in eyes wide open and know that you're going to work hard on long hours, and you have to be on some level okay with it, because it's worse to go in and not know what you're going in for. I personally, at this stage of my career, wanted that. I think coming from schools like Penn and Hopkins, where we were really driven hard, I was kind of missing that hardcore intensity. I myself am maybe a bit of an intense person, so I think I really craved that in a work setting. It's not for everyone. I think I focus a lot on employee engagement. So I will say, like, we do a lot of team activities remotely. We did a paint by numbers activity. We did a wine tasting activity. I sent everyone Valentine's Day care packages. I sent everyone packages over the holidays. I regularly tell my team how proud and appreciative I am of their hard work. I think that's very important to keeping people happy and motivated on your team. But the agency world is a revolving door, so I'm not surprised at all that the team at Saatchi left, because it's just the nature of this industry. The other thing I'll say is that the thing that's nice about healthcare communications is that there's always a job in healthcare communications. So we're always actively recruiting. And if you think about it, it's because pharma companies produce life-saving drugs. So they're never going to really run out of business. So if you're looking for an opportunity, healthcare comms may not be the sexiest, but there's always opportunities in it. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, but.
Yeah. Leica has a question, but maybe we'll do the other one first, since we're on this topic of meeting clients' expectations. So that's a question. How do you manage clients' expectations? For instance, if the client is asking for something that's impossible to be finished within a week, but it's hard for the team to finish. And that's usually right up where people get to, where they're like, can't do this anymore. It's just too hard to meet the expectations. So how have you handled those situations?
This is a tough one that we're battling every day. Our clients in particular have insane expectations. Frequent communication is what they've asked for. And I'll give you an example. The clients want communication as much as possible in terms of budget. So if we think we're not going to hit a budget that we forecasted for the month, it not only impacts MMC's revenue, but it impacts our clients' revenue. And because regulatory milestones change almost on the daily, we have found that frequent communication with the clients is the best way to manage expectations. So if we say, if we originally said, for example, we're going to deliver something by 3 p.m. today, but it's looking more like it'll be tomorrow, 10 a.m., I will try to flag it as soon as possible to the clients and keep them posted on it. So usually it's by text because they're overwhelmed by email. I'll say, just want to flag to you, we had originally thought we could get it to you by 3 p.m., but it looks like we need more time to get you the product you deserve. So it's managing their expectations, keeping them posted through frequent communications, and letting them know that if you get them more time, you're going to deliver a better product to them, I think is important. That's been the best way that we've been able to manage their expectations, but it's a difficult and ongoing challenge in this industry.
Leica, go ahead.
Okay, so I've always been passionate about working with like nonprofit organizations. So hearing you talk about that was super exciting. And I don't know if it's true, but I get this feeling that first you need to be like successful, and then you like before you can start working at like nonprofit organizations or NGOs, because like, you know, you do need to make a living first. So I just wanted to get your perspective on that, because it has been my passion for so long, and I just don't know how realistic it is so early on in my career.
It's a good one, because I have often thought about, do I want to do PR for the next 20 years, or do I want to do it for the next 10 and then go back to nonprofit? Now, you know, once I've saved some money, let's put it that way. It's a bit personal to you, right? Because it depends what you can do in a given situation. I found that in New York, personally, was very hard. I lived in New York for a long time, and to be able to afford rent, food, all that fun, all those basic necessities, you have to really earn a certain level of income to make it happen, which is why for me, living in New Delhi, it made it much easier, because I was able to live with family. You know, standard of living there is very different. That being said, there are nonprofit opportunities all over, and I found New York to be challenging, but when I lived in DC, for example, it was very manageable. And then when I lived in Boston, it was very manageable. So I think it depends on your personal circumstances, because I wouldn't want someone to give up on their dreams to work at a nonprofit just because of money. But it depends on, you know, what you need to survive, and where you can live to make it happen. I do think personally New York's challenging, but if you're open to other cities, it can be very reasonable, and it's phenomenal experience. So it's not something you should necessarily shirk on just because of the finances.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We'll do a last call for questions. I don't think any else are coming in, but before we close, Sabrina, any last words or things to share that maybe we didn't get to, or you didn't have the opportunity to share?
I think the being authentic thing is really important, and being a go-getter is really important, especially in today's world where we're in a remote setting. Throughout my career, I have built an important, like almost Rolodex of contacts, and I maintain those contacts. Edwin, you're one example of someone I've tried to keep in touch with for the past 10 years. I think we were introduced in 2014, and I reconnected with you recently, which led to my teaching opportunity at NYU. Maintain your relationships, because you never know what door could be opened up for you later on in life. And in life, it's not just about what someone can do for you, but what you can do for them. So offer to meet people for coffee, and you know, like I have a mentor at MMC, for example, and I was meeting with her yesterday, and she was offering me all this advice. And I finally realized, like, I met with her so many times and I didn't feel like I was giving her anything back. So I finally said, look, you've been giving me so much advice. What can I do for you? Relationships are all about mutual, you know, benefits. So you have to be able to not just say what's in it for me, but what's in it for that person. So meet people, maintain your relationships on LinkedIn, email, cold call people and say, you know, how did you get to where you are? I'd love to learn more. Because that's how you're going to get to where you want to go. It's not going to be by applying on LinkedIn or sending a resume online and just expecting to hear back. That doesn't really happen as much anymore. You have to build those personal relationships. I really think that's how I got to where I am today.
On that note, folks are asking if they can connect with you on LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I'm happy to, I can actually put my personal email address here too. So if anyone has, you know, wants to keep chatting and has, you know, needs advice on the personal, professional front, I'm more than happy to help answer.
Great. And I want to squeeze this last question in. Any recommended books? And we can just, or even beyond books, right? Publications, things that influence you in your work.
My reading style is a bit eclectic. I like fiction, so I haven't really read nonfiction books that influenced me in my career. My fiction books that influenced me, I love the Alexander McCall Smith series. He writes the #1 Ladies Detective Agency. those books take place in Botswana. I started reading them in my mid-20s, and it actually led me to have a passion for international development because I was keen to learn about Botswana. So I think, again, I think for me, this goes back to the authenticity piece of reading what you're passionate about, because that's going to reveal your North Star, if you will.
Awesome. Well, Sabrina, thank you for a super insightful and thoughtful session. For the folks here today, but also those who are joining us later, watching this after, we have a survey link. We're going to put it in the chat box, but if you're watching this, you probably also will receive the survey link. Before you go, it'd be really helpful if you could fill out that short survey to give us some feedback on today. Sabrina, thank you again to everyone here. Hope all of you enjoyed today's installment of Behind the Title. We have more coming up, so be sure to check the upcoming ones on Handshake. And with that, have a good day, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.